From Double Dragon to Dragon Warrior, I think it's fair to say that dragons were all the rage in the 8-bit era. They were a staple of fantasy games big and small, usually showing up as a boss our hero needs to slay in order to complete their quest. But what about games where the player didn't fight against the dragon, but instead had a chance to become one and unleash their fiery power on all of the bad guys? That's the conceit of the two franchises that we're going to be talking about today, Dragon Fighter and the Dragon Spirit series. While technically unrelated, you might be surprised by how much these two action shooters have in common. Turn back now if you don't want to know what happens next, because today we're going to spoil the stories and endings for Dragon Fighter, Dragon Spirit, and all of the sequels. This is Game Over, the early years. The first game we're going to talk about today is Dragon Fighter, an action shooter developed by Natsumi that was first released in North America back in 1992. It's the story of a typical fantasy world where everything is peaceful and the societal ills like crime and homelessness are unheard of. In fact, the world of Baljing is so prosperous that the dragon spirit that protected and nurtured the land presented the people with a decorative dragon statue that they could proudly display in the middle of their town square. But while the people enjoyed their perfect utopia, an envious and malicious warlord named Zabong was tormented by the success of Baljing. Jealous, the evil Zabong decides to create an army out of the monsters that live at Mount Jia and storm Baojing, setting the kingdom ablaze. This does not sit well with the dragon spirit, who fills the sky with dark and foreboding storm clouds and then strikes the dragon statue with a gigantic lightning bolt. Many expected the statue to burst into a million little pieces. What happened next was truly miraculous. You see, the statue transforms into a great warrior with the strength and power to push those monsters back to Mount Jia. What comes next is a fairly straightforward action platformer where you control a nameless fighter who can turn into a dragon. This ultimately leads to a showdown with Zabong, a ghoulish warlord with multiple heads and snakes for hair. Using his dragon form, the warrior defeats Zabong and saves Baljing. And here is what that looks like. Now, I want you to forget everything that you know about the dragon spirit from that last game, because this is a completely different dragon spirit. It takes place in a typical fantasy world that was once peaceful and prosperous. But when the evil demon Zawell threatens to destroy everything, the sun goddess Arlia fought to save the world. Unfortunately, she did not finish the job because Zawell has returned, this time capturing a princess named Alicia to use as a sacrifice. When the kingdom's forces are unable to help, Captain Amule raises his sword to the heaven above and asks for help. Hearing those cries, Goddess Arlia transforms the warrior into a powerful blue dragon, giving him a fighting chance to rescue Alicia. This is where the game essentially turns into a standard vertical shoot-'em-up, where we fly back and forth, fighting off the bad guys and picking up power-ups. You fly over volcanoes, a desert, a jungle, and this glacier, all while trying to find the demon's palace. This eventually leads to a surprisingly easy fight against Zawell. With all that behind us, this is what happens next. Two years after the success of the arcade original, Bandai brought Dragon Spirit to the Nintendo Entertainment System with a sequel called The New Legend. This is a direct continuation of the first game, revealing that after the defeat of Zawell, Amule and Alicia got married and had a pair of twins named Iris and Lace. Together, the happy family lived a peaceful life, assuming that the evil monsters had been defeated. Unfortunately, this was not the case, because an evil wizard named Galda was spending most of his time trying to resurrect Zawell and build up an army of monsters. In a surprise attack, this new villain kidnaps Iris and a bunch of the goddess Arlia's most trusted maidens. Knowing that he's too weak to fight, Emil reveals the secret of the sword to his son, sending the next generation on an adventure to save his sister and once again bring peace back to the land. This sets up an almost identical shoot-'em-up with awfully familiar stages. We fly over volcanoes, a desert, a jungle, and yes, this glacier, all while trying to find the demon's palace. Sound familiar? Well, it all ends with an incredibly easy fight against Galda, which leads to a much more intense battle with an even bigger and more ferocious version of Galda. And just like his father, Lace is able to defeat the demon and save the day. And here is what happens next. Now, when it came to releasing an arcade sequel, Namco decided to completely ignore everything that happened in the new Legends when making Dragon Saber. In fact, they basically ignored everything in the first Dragon Spirit game too. Just about the only thing connecting the games is the sun goddess Arlia, who appears from the sky to give two new heroes, Huey and Syria, the sacred Saber that'll allow them to change into powerful dragons. Yeah, that's right, a magical saber, not a sword. Like I said, the sequel just ignores everything that we learned from those first two games. The story here is that humanity's rush for technology and alchemy has caused an environmental disruption that created chaos in the ecosystem. The result is a bunch of biome monsters invading the Earth-like planet and threatening the human species. Now able to change into dragons, Huey and Syria fly through a lot of awfully familiar levels in an effort to destroy the biome monsters. While we've seen a lot of these levels before, the one big improvement in this sequel comes in the form of the bosses. I mean, just look at how frightening this tree is. Or even this scary-ass spider. The final fight at the end isn't nearly as spectacular as those other bosses, but pay close attention, because as we slowly kill the monsters, we reveal a secret inside. Let's see how that plays out when we watch Dragon Saber's somewhat preachy ending. While Dragon Fighter isn't officially part of the Dragon Spirit franchise, I personally think it should be. Even as a side-scrolling platformer, it has a lot more in common with the original story than the baffling arcade sequel. I mean, just by changing a few names, you could easily have it be part of the official canon. And I'm telling you, it really would have made for an awfully great ending for a strong trilogy. Hell, in my mind, I'm already filling in the gaps in the backstory, fusing it into the Dragon Spirit mythology, whether Namco wants me to or not. I would also argue the Dragon Fighter has the best ending of the 4 games. My only real complaint is that the cinema is in too much of a rush to show us the next slide. I want them to linger on the shots a little longer. Of course, that's true of a lot of old 8-bit endings, not just this one. Those endings were always in too big of a rush, and they really robbed each of the games of some of their emotional impact. But even with the speed, I would take that over the preachiness of Dragon Saber, or the lame wall of text we found in the original Dragon Spirit. Though, one thing that I actually like about that ending is how Namco used their time to show some of the other games that they made. That's not something that we've run into while reviewing these endings. I mean, that's novel. It just goes to show that we're almost 150 episodes into this series and we're still seeing something new. Now that's the Dragon Spirit. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Game Over, the early years. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes almost every week. In fact, we have a whole playlist with more than 160 episodes of these things, so give that a watch. Now, here's the question I have for you. What Dragon game has the best ending? Let me see your thoughts in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back tomorrow with the 3rd episode of Super Play's Top 600. Yeah, we're still nowhere near any of the good games, which should definitely be fun to watch. While you wait for that, please do me a favor and click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.